In looking at my break command, you'll actually see that there are two forms of the break command that's on the tool panel. I have a break that will break an object at two specific points and remove the line segment in between those points. And then I have a break at point command, and this will allow me to break an object at a specific point. It doesn't remove any of the line segment. It leaves those two segments coincident to each other, sharing a common endpoint. In looking at our break command, let's say that I wanted to remove part of the line segment out of the middle of this line. Because I want to remove the line segment, I'm going to use the break command, and it asks me to select my object. I'll go ahead and select the line. Now, it's assuming that I want to use that selection point as the first point of my break. So, for example, if I chose now the second point to be the midpoint, that line segment between my first point and my selection point and the midpoint have been removed. Now, if I didn't want my selection point to be the first point, then I would have to choose differently. I'll start break, select the line, and now I'll right click and say that I want to choose the first point. So in this case, I'm going to choose the midpoint, and for my second point, I'll use a little object tracking, and from the midpoint I'm going to track down here 2 inches, and now that's removed a 2-inch segment on the right of the midpoint. Break works just as effectively with circles or arcs or ellipses or even polylines. Let's take a look at a circle. I'm going to say break, and it wants me to select the object. I'm going to hold down the shift and choose an object snap of quadrant. So I'm going to not only select my circle but also select my first breakpoint by choosing that quadrant. And now for my second breakpoint, I'm going to choose quadrant again. I'll choose this quadrant, and you notice that it removes that segment of my circle. I can use it the same way with an ellipse. I could choose break, choose my elliptical object, right click and say first point, and in this case I'm going to use a quadrant of my ellipse, and for my second point I'll use a nearest somewhere over here, and it removes that elliptical segment. The break at point command will allow me to break an entity such as this line at a specific point. It doesn't remove any of the line segment. It creates two line segments that are coincident on that breakpoint, where they share the common endpoint. It can be found on the flyout panel, and let's see how it would work on this line. So the first thing I do is select the object, and then it asks me for my first breakpoint. In this case, I'm going to take the midpoint as my first breakpoint, and you'll see from the command line that it automatically chose that same point to be the second breakpoint because using the @ symbol. And so now this line has been broken into two line segments with a common endpoint at that same midpoint. Now my break at point doesn't work on circles, but it will work on arcs. So if I say break at point, this arc segment, and I want to break at the midpoint of the arc, I can break this into two arc segments. So my break at point will work with polylines, but it won't work with circles and ellipses that are continuous.